Hi folks, Joe Stagner again. Welcome to video number 6 in this ASP.NET Dynamic Data video series. In this video, we're going to take our work with dynamic data to the next level and start modifying the code that's generated for us when we use scaffolding. So to get started, let's go ahead and fire up Visual Web Developer Express and open the project that we've been working on. And you'll recall that this is a dynamic data application that we created by starting Visual Web Developer and selecting the ASP.NET Dynamic Data project type, and then creating link to SQL classes and selecting tables from the Northwind database. And by doing that, we got some generated code that represents our data access layer to the Northwind database. So let's go ahead and look at some of the code that got generated. So you can see here, here's our Northwind data context, and it's attributed by the link.mapping.database attribute, name equal Northwind. So this represents the database that we're working with. And we're going to make some modifications to how fields in the products table are handled. So again, we're going to use validation attributes. And so let's go down and find the class definition for the products table. So we scroll down here a little. We're going to find a class. Here we go. All right, so here we have our class definition for the product table, and notice it's partial public class product. And then we have this attribute table name equal DBO product. So this is the data access layer representation of the products table in our Northwind database. This was generated for us. And you'll note that this is defined as a partial public class. Now this is important because if you haven't experimented with partial classes before, partial classes are a powerful and relatively new construct in .NET. And in our case, the thing that's particularly interesting about partial classes is that this is generated code. But we want to extend this class, the class that represents the data access to the product table, we want to extend that class with some custom logic. Now if we wrote that custom logic in this file that's generated for us, if we ever needed to regenerate this file, so perhaps we added a table to our link to SQL classes, or we had to add columns to one of the tables that we were using, then this file would get regenerated and all of our custom code would get wiped out. But with partial classes, we can create another file and define more of the class in that other file, so that if this file ever needs to get regenerated, we don't destroy the code that we've written from scratch by virtue of regenerating this file. Right? And of course, at build and runtime, the class, the different portions of the different partial class definitions get sort of amalgamated into a single class for use at runtime. So we're going to extend this public class product with our own implementation details. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and say add a new object, and I'm doing this in the app_code folder so that it's accessible throughout our application. We're going to select the class, and we're going to call it product. And we want this to also be a partial class. Right, so we don't want any conflict. We're writing code to extend or continue the implementation of the class product. So here we're also labeling this partial public class. Now we're going to use validation attributes, and I want to be clear that you should keep your eye for the subsequent videos that are going to follow this one for a couple of reasons. First of all, attributes aren't the only way to perform rich validation at the data access layer. The other thing is that validation is only one of the kinds of things that you can do with attributes. There's a rich attribute mechanism that's built into ASP.NET Dynamic Data. So in subsequent videos, we'll look both at how to do other kinds of things with attributes beyond validation, and how to do custom logic-based validation in your dynamic data application. So don't look at this and think this is the only way you can do validation, or this is the only thing that you can do with attributes, because that's just not the case. Okay, so here we've created this public partial class for the product table. And the interesting thing here is that we're going to be applying attributes that implement validation, but this is being done at the data access layer, right? We're defining more of this class, which is one of our link to SQL classes. So that's the data access layer. And while you still want to do validation at the user interface layer to improve the user interface experience, it's very powerful to do validation at the data access layer, because it means no matter how this application evolves or where developers add additional user interface to access this products table, the validation will always take place whether the developer in the future does validation in the user interface or not. So a much more powerful way to make sure that the integrity of your database gets maintained. So let's go back over to the class that we're defining. Now, in order to do this work, we're going to need a couple of new imports. So first, let's import the DynamicData namespace. So we'll say system.web.dynamicdata. Also, because we're going to be working with these attributes, we're going to need the data annotations namespace. So let's say imports system.componentModel.data annotations. Super. Now, so remember that the product class is the one that is initially defined in our northwind.designer.vb file. So here we've created more of the class implementation, but all we're going to do is we're going to label this. We're going to provide an attribute that says metadata type, get type or type of if you're coding in C#. And here we're going to give it a name, product metadata. Now, this is a name I'm just making up. It doesn't exist anywhere yet, and as you'll see momentarily, we're actually going to get a warning that tells us that this type is undefined. Right? So type product metadata is not defined. No problem. We're going to define it now. So let's go down below our product class and add a public class named product metadata. And so what we've just done here is this is the class, this is more of the class definition for the product class. We've decorated it with an attribute that says, hey, you're going to pick up metadata, right, from the product metadata class, and then here we're defining the product metadata class. Now, in the product metadata class, we can apply attributes to any element that's defined in the product class. So in our case, we're going to be interested in the units in stock. We're just going to define it as an object, right? We don't have to apply the specific type that exists in the table. And here we can now provide the attributes. So the first thing we might want to say is required. So we definitely want to make sure that there's a number for units in stock, even if the number is 0. Next, and while we're here, notice that we're looking at validation attributes, but there are really all kinds of attributes that are available. Now, some of these attributes obviously don't have to do specifically with dynamic data, but let's scroll. So, for example, here we've got some that are specific to dynamic data. Scaffold table, scaffold column. So I don't want you to think that validation attributes are the only ones that are available to us in dynamic data applications. There's a whole collection, and in subsequent videos, as I mentioned, we'll look at some of the other ones. In our case, we're just working with validation at the moment. So one of the things we might want to say is, since units in stock is a numeric field, we might want to say, hey, we want to set a range. Right? So we want the range has got to be from 0 to, say, 150. All right, and I'm just using arbitrary numbers as an example. Right. So we've just said that units in stock and the attributes that are immediately above are applied to the units in stock object. We're saying this is a required field, and we're saying the range is 0 to 150. And if you look here, you can find that there are multiple versions of each of these attribute types. So you can explore those by using IntelliSense. Right, in our case, we're just going to provide these numerical constraints, 0 to 150. Now let's save that. Let's go ahead and run. Now remember, this is for the products table, and the field that we specifically applied those validation rules to was units in stock. So when our page comes up, we'll hop into the products table, and then we'll select one of the products that appear in that table, and let's edit this gumbo mix, and let's say units in stock are 0. Let's say units in stock are is 152. Choose update, and notice the field units in stock must be between 0 and 150. And if you explore that validation attribute, you'll find that you can change the way that what this message says if you need to. If we go back and make this, let's say 149, and then try it again, then it's accepted because the value is between 0 and 150, and we're good to go. So there you have it. Now you've learned how to extend the partial class for the table that you're interested in working with and start to apply, in our case, validation attributes. You can explore on your own some of the other attributes that are listed by using IntelliSense, or you can tune into subsequent videos and see other ways that we can both use attributes and do customized validation against the data that is manipulated through our dynamic data access layer.